Well, to discuss this, I'm joined from Moscow by Andrei Fedorov. He's the former Russian deputy foreign minister and a current member of the advisory team to President Putin. And in Washington, D.C., we have Benjamin Haddad. He is a research fellow at the Hudson Institute, specializing in European and Transatlantic affairs. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Andrei, let me begin with you. Over 115 Russians, many diplomats, expelled from more than 23 countries. They seem to be taking a unified stance here. Do you accept that they wouldn't have taken such drastic action if they weren't fairly convinced that Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were poisoned by Russia using a nerve agent, Novichok?
I think that in this case we should speak more about inter-European Union and transatlantic solidarity than the case whether people are sure or not. The whole case with Skripal is still unclear till the end, it seems to us. But anyway, this case has quite negative and maybe very long-term negative consequences for Russia and Russian foreign policy. And current confrontation is just the beginning of the new era of foreign relations of Russia, and it seems that most probably next week Russia will announce new measures, countermeasures,
right,
which will also influence.
And I want to get into that, and I want to get into the tit for tat, because that's going to be interesting. But let me ask you again, and let me ask you in a slightly different way. Is it possible that Russia used a nerve agent on the streets of Salisbury, which put the lives of more than 130 people, as Theresa May says, at risk? Is that possible that your government did that?
I don't think that it's the government. If it could happen, it's not the government.
Who do you think did it?
It's not the case which was blessed by the government.
Okay. Okay, interesting.
There might be other reasons.
Okay. Benjamin Haddad, not blessed by the government, and pan-European solidarity happening here. According to Fedorov, this doesn't really check out. The case isn't strong enough for the type of reaction we've seen from the West. Tell me why you disagree with that.
Well, first, I do think it's an important sign of solidarity from the United States and European allies with the United Kingdom after this attack. But, you know, one of the important things to remember is that this is only the latest attack in a pattern of such behavior by the Kremlin over the last decade. Remember already Litvinenko was a former Russian spy who was murdered, poisoned in the United Kingdom. You've had foreign leaders such as Yushchenko in Ukraine, who was also poisoned. And this is only one aspect of a broader type of warfare that has been waged against the West, from political interference in democracy, support for far-right, far-left populist movements, warfare on the internet.
Okay, so it's interesting.
There's a pattern of behavior, and I think it's an important sign now that finally Western democracies have decided to push back and show some solidarity.
Okay, so you say they're responding to a pattern of behavior. Not everybody's responded. I mean, I could list you a bunch of countries. Austria, they want to be a bridge builder. They don't want to get involved. Turkey, not getting involved. Portugal, Greece, Alexis Tsipras saying we need to express our solidarity to the UK, to the British people, but at the same time we need to investigate. A lot of them don't want to get involved because they don't see it as the final straw that broke the camel's back that needs to precipitate more problems in a world that already has enough problems. Isn't that a reasonable approach?
No, I think it's quite disturbing, and I think it's also a sign of political interference. I'll give you just the example of Austria. The FPO, which is the far-right movement that is currently a part of the coalition of Sebastian Kurz, has ties with United Russia. This is a party that is openly pro-Russian. And, you know, I'll tell you, I think we could actually go much further. I think a lot could be done to track down kleptocratic money that is hidden in European capitals, especially in London, in the city of London. We could pass measures such as what has been done in the United States with Magnitsky law, which forbids money that has been, you know, individuals who have acquired money in problematic ways to invest in our democracy. So much more could be done. But, you know, I'll tell you just one more thing. I mean, it's interesting if you look at the governments. You have a lot of governments from Macron's friends to Trump's America, who did not want to go on a offensive path with Russia. Macron invited Vladimir Putin very early on in his presidency to Paris. Donald Trump has praised Vladimir Putin during this campaign. And yet, these two countries took the step of expelling diplomats. So they must have seen, once again, that this was one sign of the behavior that I've been describing.
Okay, so let's take that and pose it to Andrei. Andrei, there are people who even say that Vladimir Putin put Donald Trump in the White House, right? So you have this argument that even Russia's supposed allies, or the people that Russia's been playing nice with over the past few years, found it so egregious enough that they've decided to expel these people because they saw it as a Russian attack on the West. For those who are watching in Europe, in the United States and elsewhere, you're a man who has Vladimir Putin's ear. They feel Russia is attacking them in the West. What's your response to that?
I would like to say the following, that the problem is not with the Skripal case. The problem is general character of relationship with the West since 2014. Since Crimea, since clash with Ukraine, etc., etc. Reaction in the West, as we understand here, is a reaction not only for this concrete case, but for everything what has happened in the last years. And the problem is that more and more politicians in the West, and not only politicians, are considering Russia as a threat. Though, of course, Russia is not only a black sheep in the family, but of course Russia is trying to use different ways and means to increase its influence and to play its own game. It's a normal diplomatic and political life.
And sorry to ask you the same question again. Russia's trying to use different ways and means in order to play the game. Is one of those ways and means to assassinate dissidents in the cities of other countries, whether by nerve agents or a bullet to the head?
No, I don't think so. I think it's we should consider such cases as this one, as Litvinenko, or the cases from the time of the Soviet Union, as a special thing. I think it's a special package because it's linked with a very delicate sphere of secret services. And sometimes the things which are happening on this level are going in their own way,
but
without
so this is interesting that you say this. If the Secret Service, for example, certainly, if the Secret Service, for example, did this, the man's a former spy, he and his daughter poisoned, other people sick as well. If, for example, you say there were Russians involved, but it didn't come from the government, right? We know President Putin's a very powerful man. If the rest of the world is responding in such a way, isn't it President Putin's responsibility then to crack down on whoever might have done this if it was indeed Russians and not the government?
First of all, in this latest case of Skripal, we should wait a little bit, I think, till the investigation will be finished, especially by the Organization on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Because still Russia, and this is our concern, still we didn't get any concrete results on the toxic expertise and other things. And this Novichok gas, yes, it seems to me that it has Russian origin, but the use of this gas, it's a question whether it was used by Russians and by Russians' order, or it was, as I said, internal struggle of the secret services.
Okay. Benjamin, would you,
their own way.
Certainly. Benjamin, would you keep an open mind that this might not have come from the very top?
Well, I'll tell you two things. I mean, the first one, I agree with what was said. Yes, of course, it's to be put in the broader context of the last few years, the invasion of Ukraine, the annexation of Crimea, the downing of the European flight MH17 over Ukraine. And this, of course, creates a pattern of distrust. And so, you know, a lot of European governments are not disposed to trust the Kremlin's rhetoric on this. And you also had the interference in the 2016 American campaign, the 2017 French campaign. So I think that's the first thing. And the second thing, as I said earlier, I didn't see the confidential documents that allowed the governments to come to the conclusion that the Kremlin was linked to the Skripal assassination. But governments that, once again, did not want to go on the war path with Russia. I'm talking of Emmanuel Macron, who is trying to find a way to cooperate with Russia in the Middle East, who invited Vladimir Putin a week into his presidency. Donald Trump, who kept saying, why can't we get along with Russia during the campaign? These two governments, to give just this example, decided to expel diplomats and have said that Russia was behind this assassination. So, once again, these are all signs that lead clearly to a direct responsibility from the Kremlin in this case.
Right. There's a phrase that irritates me or has irritated me over the past 10 years whenever analysts have used it, whenever there's tension between Russians and the West, they always say, new Cold War, new Cold War. But this time, I guess we need to take it a bit more seriously because politicians themselves are using this phrase. Boris Johnson used it, as well as the Russian ambassador to Australia. Let's have a little listen.
Well, if the West would follow this line, I'm afraid we'll be deeply in a Cold War situation.
Andrei Fedorov, does it stick this time? As we add all of these things together, the Skripal case and everything, the aforementioned things that you and Benjamin mentioned, are we in a position where we're in a possible new Cold War?
No, I think that at this stage we are at cool war. Cold War is coming, and coming quite soon, I think, because there are more and more problems ahead, starting with Syria and up to other things, disarmament, short and medium-range missiles, etc. The problem that we are at the gate of the Cold War, and there is from my point of view, there is 90% possibility that we will enter this gate quite soon, maybe in a month or two.
And that's not good for anyone, is it, Benjamin? A new Cold War? Hell, the Cold War was a terrible idea.
Yeah, well, once again, I mean, the problem is when you have a leader in Russia who said that the fall of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century, this is the Russian leadership who maybe is nostalgic of the Cold War, of a time where Russia was on the same standing as the United States in this bipolar rivalry. I don't think this is a new Cold War. I don't think Russia is the same kind of military or economic or ideological challenge that it was to the West. But I think when a country decides to invade its neighbor or interfere in its partner's politics, of course we should react.
Right. So, Andrei, looking at Russian retaliation, clearly the expulsion of all these people, I don't have their names. A lot of them are not official diplomats. Some of them are suspected spies and so on. But clearly it has pinched Russia, if not hurt Russia. There'll be Russian retaliation. How can we expect it to unfold? Is Russia going to make things more difficult for the West in Syria? What's Russia going to do?
I think that we will face the problem of breaking down the dialogue between Russia and the West. This is the biggest danger which we might face in the coming days, weeks, and months. The absence of dialogue on many things could lead to really new tension. And it's absolutely clear for us that after inauguration, after 7th of May, Vladimir Putin will return back to the foreign policy field at full strength. And he has now a very serious dilemma what to do. But I think that he will try to come to the new understanding with the West via the confrontation model.
Benjamin, how are you not frightened at hearing that the only way forward is confrontation and there's a breakdown of dialogue?
No, I think dialogue is still important. The problem is how you conduct the dialogue. Dialogue should not be just giving in to what the Kremlin is doing or asking. It should be having very strict red lines. It should be defending our own interests and values. For example, if you take the sanctions, it's very clear that the sanctions will be lifted if the Minsk II agreements in Ukraine are respected, which means recovering the sovereignty of Ukraine in the Donbass, which means Russia, withdrawing its support for rebels and separatists, withdrawing its troops from Ukraine. So this is just one case in which we have a dialogue. There was a ceasefire, but there were sanctions that were applied after the invasion of Ukraine, and they can be lifted. And it's the same thing for the Skripal case. You can continue talking to the Kremlin, but at the same time, if you have assassinations in your own capitals, in your own countries, you do need to send a very strong signal. So I don't think it's mutually exclusive with continuing to talk, but at the same time, you do have to, be very clear on what your red lines are.
Andrei Fedorov, there's a World Cup coming up in the summer. Everybody wants to enjoy the football. Are we going to see a diplomatic and political showdown happening during the World Cup as well?
Okay, it's a problem for us that many officials, including UK officials, will not come. Of course, it's create not the best background for this event, but I would like to really look at it from the other point of view. The World Cup, from my personal point of view, should be absolutely free from politics. Of course, for Putin, it's not only sports, but political event. Mm-hmm. And from this point of view, I think in the current situation, he will do absolutely the best to make it nice, friendly, etc., and secure.
Okay, gentlemen, it's been fascinating picking both your brains. I really thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers, Andrei Fedorov and Benjamin Haddad. Thanks again.